Welcome to The Direct Approach with Wayne Moorehead, an exclusive podcast brought to you by Direct Selling News. Host Wayne Moorehead interviews some of the leading marketers and innovators in direct selling to help your marketing and branding teams motivate the field, attract and engage customers, and further your brand's reach and impact. In today's episode, Wayne is joined by Glenn Sanford, a serial entrepreneur who is also the founder of eXp Realty and CEO of eXp World Holdings and Success. He started eXp Realty with a revolutionary concept, a real estate brokerage that is entirely cloud-based, completely eliminating the expense of brick-and-mortar locations. eXp Realty was ranked number 9 on the 2021 DSN Global 100 list with $1.8 billion in revenue, and was also a DSN Bravo Growth Award recipient. Glenn and Wayne will discuss the inherent benefits and opportunities of entrepreneurship and how the conventional wisdom surrounding risk versus reward is counterintuitive. Wayne and Glenn take a deep, informative, and fascinating dive into Glenn's journey through the ups and downs of starting multiple businesses. You'll learn his philosophies on what ventures to pursue and what ventures to abandon. Glenn also shares his thoughts on how to identify the right niche and how to solve the inevitable roadblocks you'll encounter. He'll also give his unique take on how the direct sales model revolutionized eXp Realty. This episode is full of insights, takeaways, and wisdom from a billionaire entrepreneur who has been adapting and evolving his approach since his early teens. But before we dive into the interview, have you heard about the new DSN VIP community? The DSN VIP community is a new way to keep up with what's happening in the channel by receiving the industry news and information you want most in text sent straight to your phone. If text is one of your preferred means for communication and information, simply text the word JOIN to 214-239-3043. VIP community members get access to breaking industry news, research, and so much more in a convenient text to stay in the know and up to speed on what's happening in the channel. There's no separate app to download. It literally shows up right in your phone's texts. All you have to do is text the word JOIN to 214-239-3043. Then follow the prompts, save DSN as a contact in your phone, and then text us what type of news and information you are most interested in receiving. You can even use emojis to tell us what you'd like to know. We invite you to join the DSN VIP community today. Now, a word from our sponsor.
The influence of social media is undeniable. On average, people spend over 2 hours a day connecting with family, friends, and brands across social media. But did you know that it's also the way that most consumers prefer to discover new products? In fact, over 60% of people say they discover new products on Instagram. Additionally, Forbes reports that 78% of salespeople using social selling outsell their peers. To compete in today's marketplace, you must capitalize on your most valuable asset, your social media influencers. Introducing Now Social, the smartest way to effectively grow and monetize your network. Just as we revolutionize the way distributors share content, offer samples, and sell products, we're now bringing the same innovation to social selling. Now Social simplifies the process of creating and scheduling content and allows you to manage posts and engagements across all platforms. And even if your distributors have never attempted social selling before, Now Social empowers anyone in your field to become a successful micro-influencer. As more and more consumers turn to social media to connect with brands and discover new products, it's more important than ever to have the most effective social selling strategy. What are you waiting for? Your time is now.
Now please help me welcome your host, Wayne Moorehead, and today's guest, Glenn Sanford, founder of eXp Realty and CEO of eXp World Holdings and Success.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of DSN's Direct Approach podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Moorehead, and I'm very excited to be joined today by the founder of eXp Realty and the CEO of eXp World Holdings, Glenn Sanford. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Wayne. Great to be here.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time. So you've had such an impressive and fascinating entrepreneurial journey. Do you mind telling us a little bit about the company and the path that led you to founding it?
Yeah, well, so the eXp Realty, which is, I'm the CEO of eXp Holdings, but fundamentally, we're the fastest growing real estate brokerage in the history of residential real estate. We're
Wow.
started 12 years ago, almost to the day, in 2009, and we started with about 25 agents, really with the premise of building the real estate brokerage that I would have went to work for and been a lifer at had it existed when I was an agent. That was really the basic premise. And in 2009, as you probably remember, we were at the bottom of the housing market. Everything had fallen off a cliff. The second half of 2008, nobody could get a mortgage in October, November of 2008. The Fed had to come in and prime the pump, and all the stimulus that took place. And even in 2009, real estate transactions are pretty slow. We're a lot of for sale by, well, not for sale by owners, but REOs, basically bank-owned properties, were being put on the market. Most home sellers were actually underwater just because of what had taken place really earlier on. And so in 2009, I couldn't afford physical offices. So prior to 2009, I'd actually started my own real estate brokerage in 2007 called Buyer Tours Realty, and we'd got it up to about 4 offices. And even prior to that, I'd been an agent and built a team, and then I'd come out of the technology world. I'd been involved with a number of startups. I started up an e-commerce logistics company, worked for AOL. So I had this tech bent to me. But in 2009, we had this really what I called the perfect storm. We had the housing market was in the toilet. Real estate transactions were 50% or less of what the volume had been just a few years earlier. And at the same time, technology, the high-speed internet had finally got to the point where you literally had high speed in your pocket. So if I pulled out my phone, which I'm not sure if I've got it, but if I pulled out my phone, I can actually get high-speed internet now on that. And back then it was 3G. Of course, by 2009, cable internet had pretty much gotten to every home in America, whereas when I got my real estate license in 2002, it was primarily dial-up. And you were lucky if you had anything faster than a 56K baud modem back in 2002. And so in that period of time, we got high-speed internet everywhere. We had a housing market that couldn't support the bricks and mortar infrastructure. And so we just literally said, hey, why don't we build a real estate brokerage that doesn't have physical offices? As an agent, I very seldom went to the office anyway. And so could we duplicate the products and services online? And then could we take a bunch of the savings that we get from not having physical offices and actually create a comp model akin to a direct sales organization, but use it for residential real estate agents? So that really was the basic premise in 2009. 25 agents, fast forward a few years, 2013, we actually became a public company, sort of almost before it was cool to become a public company. Now, everybody's got public companies. There's everything going on from SPACs and IPOs to whatever. But in 2013, we became a public company for the single purpose of being able to share equity with our agents and brokers. And so in 2014, we started to share equity as well as our rev share program, sort of our network marketing style comp model with our agents. And we really started to take off 2015 ongoing. So first year we grew 100% year over year was 2015. 2016, we grew over 200%. 2017, over 100%. 2018, over 100%. 2019, I think we were close to 100%. 2020, a little bit below that. This year, I think we're 87%, agent growth rate, revenues up over 100%. So we've just been on this tear, had our first $1 billion in commission quarter in Q2 this year, which was just crazy. And I forget what the actual amount of real estate sold in the quarter was, but I think it was something like $30 billion worth of real estate sold in one quarter. And so this has just been this crazy growth curve.
That's amazing. Congratulations on all the success. You said a couple of things there that I'd love to kind of dig in on a little bit. And one of those was kind of you identifying that need in the marketplace. And you said almost kind of solving a problem or a need that you had or would have had earlier. One of the superpowers of entrepreneurs, I believe, is their ability to kind of see into the distance and identify those unique market opportunities. And you've been able to do this multiple times. But what is that process like for you? Is it, trying to scratch an itch that you might have, solve a need, or, are there other parts to that process that are important from an entrepreneurial startup perspective?
Yeah, well, there was a book. It's called The Entrepreneur's Manual. I think it was written in the late '70s, early '80s, and I literally got it when I was a teenager. It's like remember when there was the book club for a penny. You could get like a bunch of books sent to you.
Oh yeah,
remember that? So like Random House, or I don't remember what it was,
Mhm.
but one of the books I got was The Entrepreneur's Manual, and I read it, and there was a section in there on how to identify business opportunities, and I really took it to heart. And it was, what is one pain point that you have that you can identify and that isn't being solved in the marketplace? So what's as you mentioned, the itch, and then sort of look at how many other people are like me that has the same itch. And so for me, that has been a very formative way to come up with some of the business ideas that I've had over the years. Now, most of the time, you think other people have an itch and they don't, and so that's why most entrepreneurs have started multiple businesses. I think I've got 17 businesses under my belt, 13 or 14 of which I wish I wouldn't have started in the first place, other than the learning experiences I got from them. And
Sure.
But it is part of the process, sort of identifying niches, identifying motivation, sort of learning what works, what doesn't, why do people do what they do, and why do people join with you or not as you try to build something that you believe is worthwhile. And so there's a whole big process. But I think that first part is, if I have a challenge and I can solve it for me, are there other people I can solve it for? So at the end of the day, in some respects, I get that product for free because other people are paying for it. So that kind of was a lot of the thought process that I had over years. So, internet lead gen was a big thing for me personally, and I got really good at it for me. And so I imagined that if I did internet lead gen for others, they might pay me for it. And that became, part of the backdrop of my first iteration into real estate. And then start solving the problems of actually running a brokerage, and then solving the challenges of actually scaling an enterprise. And one of the cool things is that 99% of the population are not gluttons for punishment, but they'd love to be able to participate in the rewards that come from building a business. And that's why I think the comp models that you're involved with, that I've pioneered, are really a very democratizing way to grow businesses, because it does allow people to get benefits without having to go through the brain damage. And I think that's part of being an entrepreneur, is helping other people not have to go through the brain damage.
Absolutely. And you said something, I think, really important there, that, you do identify a need that you personally have. And almost part of you discounts it because you think that, well, if I've got this need, someone else has already done it or someone else has already tried it. But so often that need has not been addressed yet, and that there's a really sizable, addressable market behind that need, that if somebody just took the initiative and just went after it, that they could really be able to capitalize on.
Yeah, well, and everything is solvable. In business, the Google is our friend. I mean, somebody has solved various aspects of the thing we're trying to solve, but maybe not for our industry or for the type of product or service that we're trying to market. But somebody's already solved, each step along the process has been solved, but not in your unique, aspect. So there's a lot of, what's R&D is really, short form for rip off and duplicate. So the idea of finding where somebody solved that challenge for their business or their thing, and then adopting that in
Mhm.
to your business, it is everything's figure outable if you're willing to sort of, dedicate the time and resources and stay, time on task to come up with your unique way of solving things.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such an amazing way to apply those other opportunities, find something that's analogous and pull that into your need, so that you're not recreating the wheel or completely starting from scratch, but that you're really drafting off of some other idea, or some other concept, but just applying it in a new way. I think that's a great form of innovation. You talked about the number of businesses that you've started, and it seems like that entrepreneurship has been in your life. It's been in your blood, literally kind of from the beginning. And I read that your dad told you one time that it's riskier to take a job than it is to create a job. And I think that's really powerful. I was really moved by that. Can you talk a little bit about how that impacted and informed how you approached your career, getting that advice from such a central figure in your life?
Yeah, well, it was probably my number one most formative statement that my dad ever gave me. It gave me sort of two different paradigms to think about. One was, being an entrepreneur is less risky than going and getting a job, because you can get fired from your job. You're typically not getting paid what you're worth, in whatever role you're in, because your role is to add value to the organization that you're a part of. So, but if you are, then a lot of times you're not getting paid what you're worth. And then, so the question is there a career path that gets you to where you want to go? And there's only so many people at the top that can be in an organization. So mentally, it's just hard for me to think about, do I want to go through that track, or do I want to just create something of my own and then attract people to that and then give them as big an opportunity as I possibly can? And that's the approach that I took. And really, the concept was, it's riskier to take a job than it is to start a business, which is exactly opposite or backwards from what most people will say. It's riskier to start a business than it is to go get a job, and yet most people, that's why they go and take a job. Now they're worried about the fact that they might have to struggle to pay rent or put food on the table or what have you. But for the most part, if you're ambitious and you're passionate, and you might have to, heck, I've had huge amounts of credit card debt. I haven't paid my creditors at some point in my life because of being an entrepreneur. But another piece of advice I got from somebody else is that creditors can't eat you and they can't put you in jail. So credit is a tool for an entrepreneur, and to some extent, a lot of this stuff is all baked into how credit is shared. So I've had bad credit. I haven't been able to pay my bills, but of course now I can pay pretty much any bill anybody throws at me, which is kind of a unique place to be. The other piece of advice that my dad gave me was that starting a company, specifically a company, a C Corp, an LLC, what have you, is another way to create huge amounts of leverage as an entrepreneur. So, if I pull out $100 bill and I show it to you, and I show you a share certificate that's worth $100, which one is worth more? And so I just pose that, like, which one, in your opinion, is worth more, $100 bill or $100 share certificate?
I'll take the share certificate.
Well, you're a smart guy, and you probably knew that was the answer, but and may have actually known why the answer is. But one, a share certificate represents ownership in a company, and companies generally, if run well, grow over time. So the value of it should go up versus the dollar. But the other piece is, if I take my $100 bill and I throw it into a copier and I copy it and I hand it to you, I go to jail. However, I can go and I can create a new share certificate from my company and I can hand it to you, and you'll take it as a form of payment. So it's one of these, it's a form of leverage that allows you to create effectively equity or value inside of a company by sharing the company. And so you can create as many $100 share certificates effectively as you want. I mean, it's, the perceived value of it. You don't want to, create all these shares that don't have any value. But as long as you're doing it responsibly, you can create as many share certificates as you need to attract talent, to pay for stuff, to do a lot of unique things with those share certificates that is really hard to do with dollars, because you got to go earn the dollars in order to actually use the dollars.
Oh, that's amazing. What an incredible gift to be given that type of perspective and that type of advice early on. Growing up, I probably got the opposite advice, like many of us. My dad was a depression baby, and remembers very hard times. And so, when he got a job, I grew up in DC. It was with the federal government, and he stayed there for 40 years. So he didn't leave once, because he, prided himself on the security that and the safety, maybe, or even perceived security or safety that offered. But in today's economy, and in today's marketplace, I agree that it's counterintuitive that I don't think any job is safe. Even if we look at a 9 to 5 as, hey, that's the safe route. That's not necessarily true anymore, just with the tenure that people normally have at companies now. And I think the opposite is almost true, as you were saying, to go and start your own company, to be your own boss, which again, the direct selling channel is really based on. You have more control over your destiny in a lot of ways, more control over variables than you do walking into a company where you actually have very little control.
No, for sure. And I think that's jobs are useful in that they can, pay some bills in the short run. I mean, I've got fired from most of my jobs I've ever taken, because I'm also, I think that's actually a good trait, is if you're truly ambitious, then, to some extent you're relatively unemployable, because you're going to be, pushing the envelope, because you don't want to sit there and just breathe the oxygen and sort of wait for the next customer to come in the door. You're going to be doing things that are totally out of the norm. That's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. And so, if you're truly geared to being an entrepreneur, one of the earmarks of a lot of entrepreneurs is they've got, if they didn't get the sort of the top seat in the organization they were a part of, they end up getting fired quite often, because they're not going to stand for sort of the status quo, because they're kind of going for the next stage. The other part of it is that, you do have to figure out, what ultimately is going to provide scalable income for you as an individual. Expenses are they going to go up, or are they going to go down? Well, they're going to go up. Are you going to want a bigger house or a smaller house in the future? You're probably going to want a bigger house. Are you going to have more kids or less kids in the future? Probably more. So, you just think about, expenses go up. Income from jobs typically stay fairly static. And so, where can you actually grow income in a way that actually scales as your, wants, needs, desires expand as well. And so, direct sales, network marketing, or any sort of, sales career where you can actually grow your income is one of the few places that consistently today you can actually, with a fair degree of predictability, do that.
So to that point, as you're talking about somebody, you obviously were given great advice that helped kind of push you in a direction, but you also probably had that aptitude, that personality. Do you see entrepreneurship as a skill set or a mindset?
I think it's a mindset first,
Okay.
and then it's a skill set second. Meaning that you have to decide who you want to be when you grow up, and then you have to pursue everything you can to be that person. And most people haven't decided to be anything more than they are right now. So, then, going and doing the sales training and doing the work, it doesn't take on as much meaning for them. But if you've decided, hey, and I decided at a young age, like I was probably 15, 16 or so, when I sort of recognized sales, and I was reading like the Zig Ziglars and the Napoleon Hills and the Og Mandinos and the what have you. I mean, I was reading really good quality content, but I recognized that sales was a fundamental skill that once I had it, I would always be employable. And I knew that I wanted to be able to make money in the future and be able to do it. And I figured that if there was a recession, whether there was a depression, if there was a whatever, there would always be a need for a good salesperson. So for me, first and foremost, I wanted to make sure that I could always put food on the table if necessary. And so that's why I pursued sales. And then it was really sales plus learning sort of business acumen that came from sort of those formative years, but then just trying stuff over the years, figuring out what would work from a business perspective. But it was mindset first, skill set second. You could probably train first, and then eventually the switch might flip. So you could sort of say, I'm gonna learn sales, and then eventually the switch flips. But I think if you can choose first what you're going to do and then do it, it works way better than doing stuff and then figuring out if that's something you really want to do.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a really interesting way to look at sales. I've never heard anybody describe it in that way, but it is probably one of the few, if not the only functions that is transferable, like from categories to channels to industries. It is completely transferable. And also it's based on that human interaction. So it kind of favors the EQ there, which is also transferable, to any company, any industry. I think that's really interesting. And on the kind of mindset part as well, I think that some of the most successful entrepreneurs that I've ever seen did it because, in their mind and for them, it was the only viable option. To your point, they probably wouldn't have made a great, 9-to-5 employee. They want to do things outside of the box. They want to, move quicker than organizations and kind of outside some of the confines or guardrails that organizations have. But yeah, I do think it's interesting. You can kind of train some of that skill set, but man, the best entrepreneurs are the ones that really don't have a choice. And I mean that in the most beautiful and wonderful way.
Yeah, you do have to, in order to be a true entrepreneur, you do have to burn the bridges. And you have to basically put yourself in a position where you have to succeed, or bad things start to happen. And so, a lot of times, the job is a crutch that you don't actually have to pursue it because, we've all heard the phrase, especially in this industry, a job, it stands for just above broke. And if you're just above broke, then you're not really motivated to go make more money. But if you are broke, guess what? Everybody who is broke will figure out a way to get food in their belly and hopefully a roof over their head. And if they're pursuing it in a constructive way, it's almost impossible not to succeed if you can get hungry. So I think that hungry salespeople are always going to outperform their non-hungry counterparts over time if they start sort of the same level, because they're going to do whatever it takes to sort of get to that next level. And if you can keep that hunger going, then you can go as long as you want. So like one of the things I always talk to entrepreneurs about is don't spend the money that you're making when you make it. Leave it in your company, pay yourself a basic salary, but don't go live high on the hog, because you're subconsciously, if you start to be around the trappings of success, you may start to coast. So so living in a way where you're not sort of seeing it yet, because I think it means something subconsciously, will allow you to get further along the path. And at some point, you'll want to take some chips off the table and you'll want to do some things.
Sure.
But I've stayed very hungry most of my life. And I've noticed that when I start to actually sort of feed my surroundings with a lot of trappings of success, I start to actually coast. And then I go, what's more important to me personally? Building a business and helping others with their entrepreneur endeavors, or me enjoying, more casual activities. And when I actually ask the question, I sort of say I get more meaning out of helping others than I do of, sailing the world.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, there's a lot there. I love the idea of, even when you've kind of reached a point where you don't have to kind of artificially, keeping that hunger alive, that scarcity there, and using that as fuel to help drive you forward. And I think also for perspective on prioritization, as you talked about it, and helping other people and making sure that you're putting the right things first and not, kind of sitting back on your laurels and kind of enjoying the winnings, but really keeping that drive going. And I also think that there's a lot. I'm a big fan of Stoicism and Stoic philosophy, and I actually think there's a lot of kind of Stoic principles in there and what you said, and not getting caught up in some of the trappings, but continually reminding yourself of priorities and needs. So I think that's really cool. One of the other, as it relates to entrepreneurship, one of the other defining characteristics that we always hear and read so much about is that principle of grit, the ability to keep forging ahead despite the odds, and never quitting, never say die. And you talked about starting around a dozen companies maybe since your mid-teens or something like that. I think grit is really important. Again, I've never been the hardcore entrepreneur that you have, for sure. But I think it seems like it's also important to kind of balance or have that tempered with kind of awareness and rationality. So you've started many successful businesses, you've seen hyper growth here at the company, but I'm sure at some point in your career, you've had to kind of make a shift and maybe walk away from an opportunity. How do you know as an entrepreneur, when to maybe give up on the grit a little bit and move on and pivot to a different opportunity?
Yeah, well, I think one is just owning where you're at. I think you can always pivot from where you're at to the next sort of opportunity. And I think part of being a good entrepreneur is recognizing it's time to pivot and recognizing it early enough to be able to take advantage of what it is that you're seeing that you can pivot to. Now, that being said, once you find something that works, you want to leverage the heck out of it. So, so a lot of times as an entrepreneur, you're trying to find the thing that is scalable. But a lot of times we find stuff that isn't that scalable. And then you do get sort of trapped in that business if you're not willing to walk away. So I've kind of looked at it even in my career as a real estate agent. So like from 2002, when I got my license, I had to be willing to take steps back multiple times on the journey to get to where I'm at in order to not have a ceiling in what I was doing. So when I think about being an individual agent on a real estate team, I can sell a certain number of homes a year, and then at that point I hit a ceiling individually. And so then the question is how do I break through that ceiling? Well, next thing in real estate, we talk about starting a team. So we'll have a team of people, and then we find out that our capacity to manage a certain number of people in that model has a certain capacity. And then the next thing is, okay, well, now I need to start a brokerage. And then you figure out that with certain comp models, only a certain number of people are attracted to it. And so you have to just keep on sort of going, okay, where's the ceiling? When do I notice where the ceiling is? And then at the point that you start to recognize that the ceiling is approaching, instead of waiting till you hit the ceiling, start to think about how are you going to pivot so that you can go through where you would have went. It might take you a little longer, but your upside is substantially bigger. And so just recognizing that anything that you're doing will have a certain amount of capacity based on numerous factors, mainly in the early stages, all going to be based on you. But eventually it's like, how do you include more people? How do you include more people? How do you create opportunities for more people? How do you create more opportunities for people? And then eventually it should, and in my case, I've got to a point where it's taken a little bit of a life of its own. So, even if I stepped away, it would probably continue to do well and continue to grow. But, just recognize, at what point can you step away if you wanted to? And I think that's ultimately where you want to get to, is if you can't step away from what you're doing, if your business won't continue to grow without you, then either you're in the wrong business, it's not truly scalable, or you haven't got to the point where you've been able to attract enough other leaders in to keep it going after you. So, so just sort of looking at that, and then just recognizing what are your goals, what do you ultimately want to achieve while you're on planet Earth.
So continuing on that, obviously your company has experienced hyper growth and incredible growth over the last several years since you started it, and you've attributed some of that success to the systems that you've put in place to enable that scalability that you were just talking about, to be able to, reach those ceilings or inflection points and, be able to kind of catapult past those. So as you've looked at it, how do you go about implementing those systems, and where do the best systems come from? Are they internal? Is it working with your sales team? Where are the best places to kind of deploy those systems, if that makes sense? Is it in those inflection points? What are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's technical systems for sure. And I always, technology is really, enabling technology is technology that reduces friction in the sales cycle for all intents and purposes. And or in the process, you either scale through technology or scale through people, or you scale through both. I guess those are the three ways that you can scale. And really the ultimate is probably, scaling through both. You're scaling with technology, which creates more efficient processes and systems, but you're scaling with people by providing those people with opportunity to build outsized opportunities for themselves by helping you build your business. And so, how do you sort of do, those things in conjunction and really harness, all of the potential of technology and all the potential of the people that are helping you go to the next level. And so there's a lot of systems thinking that goes into it. So when, so thinking about everything from, how do you train, what's the language that you use internally with your team, what's the technology stack that you're going to build on, how much is it off the shelf, how much is it stuff that you have to actually do and innovate yourself to actually make it all come together. So I think there's just a lot of different decisions that you have to make along the way, and every answer is somewhat unique to the circumstance. So even though I might have a set of technologies that I use, most likely that set of technologies is going to be totally different than somebody who's trying to compete with me in the same business. They're going to come up with their own stack based on their own needs. And generally, if they're copying, which obviously there are copycats out there, they're not going to understand why those systems were chosen to begin with. So if they go, oh, we're going to copy this technology stack, well, they won't know why I picked them. So they may not understand why they're that important, because a lot of times the importance is nuanced. It's not obvious. And then you also have to the person who comes up with the idea of picking a particular product or service, a lot of times you're still harvesting the ahas that they've had along the way, and those are still emerging. And so there's just this process of, how do you put systems in place? How do you merge those ideas? And how do you keep on moving in that same direction? A lot of it has to do, again, with the team that you bring in. If you don't bring in the right team members, they may fight the entrepreneur because they are the expert. An expert is by definition, somebody who will tell you how you can't do it because they're and where the entrepreneur is, I want to do this entirely different, and I want to reject sort of the common answers for how you do things, because that's where the opportunities exist.
So regarding the technology and being able to leverage that, I think that that's another great example of your strength, that superpower that entrepreneurs have of being able to look down into the distance and see a need and an opportunity. And I think specifically around technology as it relates for you, at least in the example of your company, as it relates to remote work and virtual work. Recently, in the last 18 months, the rest of us and our companies were trying to figure out how to work virtually, how to work remotely the hard way. And it's something that all of our companies are wrestling with right now. What should the new go forward be? Is it remote? Is it in person? Is it a blend? 10 years before this, almost, it seems like that's something that you identified that need and really infused that into your entire organization and went remote. So what were some of the catalysts for this? How did you see that need so far ahead? And then how do you see the future of work really?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. One, I'd been in technology prior to my real estate career, and I'd worked for AOL. I'd built an online service in Western Canada called Interactive Cafe. I'd been sort of a sysop of a number of different sort of bulletin board systems. So it's sort of like you sort of think about like Facebook before there was a Facebook. So it was bulletin boards and chat rooms, which, for all intents and purposes was Facebook. It's bulletin boards and chat rooms. You get the extra, you get more animated GIFs nowadays, and you get videos and stuff that goes through the stream, but it's pretty much the same stuff. So, so I kind of understood that community building aspect. In 2009, we had Skype was kind of the video conferencing platform. And even just like our conversation here today, it's a little bit of a challenge to do this. We're doing it because this can be broadcast to other people and people are going to watch this. But I'm having to look at a camera up here and your face is actually technically down here. So I'm not actually looking face to face. And so it creates a strain on our communication. I want to look engaged and attentive to you. And the best way to do that is look in a camera. But if you're doing the same thing, we're actually not looking at each other. We're just looking at a camera and having a conversation. And so when we were looking at the fact that one, we couldn't afford physical offices in 2009 for our real estate brokerage. And I'd come from this sort of community building aspect, and then recognizing that Skype at the time, Zoom today, is not a great way to do a virtual office. It's great for one-way communication or presentations, or maybe just having a two-way conversation like we're doing. But you start to think about actually having group meetings and breakouts and conversations, water cooler and all that stuff. And then we have to worry about, our backdrop. You had to put together a decent backdrop. I have a decent backdrop for me, but there's a lot of people there, if you're working remote or whatever, backdrop, bad hair day, whatever, people are self-conscious about sitting in front of a camera. And so we just recognized that in 2009. We said, okay, we want to be able to build a real estate brokerage that's not dependent on bricks and mortar. And an agent actually asked me in July of 2009 what I thought the real estate office of the future looked like. And I literally spouted off without thinking that in the future, you'll literally be able to go into an office with your broker, be able to do paperwork from anywhere, and you'll be able to have meetings and sort of do that. And so that was kind of the virtual world concept. And that was the light bulb that went off. Is like, if that's the future and we're trying to build a real estate brokerage, why don't we use a virtual world for business? And that was kind of the light bulb. And then we looked at, the different platforms that were available then. There's about 10 of them. We picked one. That company went out of business. Eventually, the company that we went with after that went out of business. The company after that went out of business. And so we ended up in another platform called Verbella, and we actually ended up buying that company because we're like, we were their largest customer by a significant margin. And we wanted to make sure that they stayed in business because it's such a great technology for being able to work 100% remote. So I've not went to a physical office in 12 years. Our entire team works entirely remote. We have 1,800 staff, 65,000 agents and brokers in 18 countries, and we have no physical office that we're building it from. We're doing it entirely from, the collaborative technologies of Verbella. We do use some people will use some Zoom or Google Meets or what have you, but we've got these virtual world platforms where we're able to actually be shoulder to shoulder, working together just like we're in the same office. And it's pretty amazing how we've been able to sort of pull that off and not miss a beat in the last, year and a half since the pandemic took place. We literally, other than some staffing changes that we made in April 2020, we've literally not changed how we operate or how we work.
That's incredible. And obviously, you see so much greater advantages working, I'll call it, in kind of that virtual world versus a Zoom world. Where there is more interaction, there are more connections, there are more opportunities for those kind of collisions, where it literally is, my understanding is a virtual world, a virtual work environment.
It is, yeah. I mean, everybody, whether you're a $20 an hour employee or a top C-suite exec, you're in there shoulder to shoulder with everybody all day long, working together, organizing, getting things done. And a lot of business. I mean, we talked about Q2. We did 131,000 real estate transactions. These are people buying or selling homes. Probably our average price point was, between $300,000 and $400,000 worth of real estate that was transacted. And yet our staff that sort of pulled all this stuff together, from training, from support, from compliance, from accounting to whatever. Everybody was in this world and very accessible to anybody in the company.
That's incredible. So you touched on this earlier at the opening of the podcast, but I know that you're a huge proponent of alignment, and you advocate for it, throughout the organization, up, down, internally and externally, especially when it comes to incentives and compensation. So you've taken a really interesting tack to this. Can you speak a little bit about the approach that you've implemented there and the impact that it's had on the business?
Yeah. So, if you think about real estate agents, I mean, these are salespeople who go out and they list and sell real estate, and it's a great profession because if you're good at it, it pays really well. Or as Tom Hopkins used to say, sales is the best paying hard work and the lowest paying easy work that you can ever do. But the part of it that's challenging, the hard work, is that you're dealing with a lot of people with a huge amount of emotional attachment to either the home they own or the home they want to buy. And it can be very taxing. So we, real estate agents are, to some extent, we're psychologists as much as we are real estate agents. Sure. Because we're having to sort of deal with all of this emotional stuff, and it taxes us as individual real estate professionals. And so, I saw it as a great profession, but I also wanted to personally be able to get off of the hamster wheel of going out and always listing and selling real estate, because it was, just the emotional roller coasters that went along with that. And we've all met those really calloused, hard-nosed real estate agents who, emotionally are just, they're more like this than they are like this. And I think it just happens over time because of just the emotional sort of consequences. So for us, we said, okay, what's it going to take to help an agent actually build a business, help us build a business that actually gives them sort of an off-ramp from the hamster wheel of sales? And of course, we took, a page out of the direct sales industry, and I'd been involved in my entrepreneurial, 17 businesses that I had started. At least 5 of them were involved with some sort of network marketing company. And so I was in Amway 2 or 3 times. I was in New Ways. I was in, I can't remember all the companies I was involved with, but there were a number of companies I'd been involved with, and I always loved the comp model. The challenge is that in my opinion, a lot of the products and services that are sold that way are not in line with who that individual is. But for a real estate agent, they're already out there listing and selling real estate. So now we're just saying, hey, why don't you continue to do exactly what you're doing, but now we're going to share some of the revenue that would normally have went to the bricks and mortar and the redundant staffing costs. We're going to put that back into a model where you can actually earn income from helping us grow the brokerage. And so that really became a huge driver. And we recognized that if somebody took advantage of it, it could be a very lucrative financial model for them. And so like right now, we literally have our first agent in the history of EXP, who's only been with us since 2015, who's now earning, seven figures or right at seven figures a month from that, expansion of the real estate brokerage. And so, and we've got, a lot of people in the sort of six-figure a month range, and certainly, a ton more in the 50 to 100 range, et cetera. But it all comes down to this idea that if we share the revenues that would have went to the broker owner with those agents and brokers who are helping us grow, they can actually earn more than their bricks and mortar broker owner counterparts because of just the financial model. So, you look at, agents who are, or broker owners, very few are earning the types of income that, our top earners are making.
That's incredible. I love the idea of taking some of the efficiencies from the business model that you've created and kind of put that back out into the field. And not only does it reward the company and the broker from a financial standpoint, but also I just have to imagine from a cultural standpoint, from a helping to build that culture to attract new team members. It's got to go a really long way in helping all of those brokers to feel that we're all in the same boat. We're all in this together. We all have skin in the game. We're all owners in this company.
Yeah, and the piece that I think really, so you've got sort of, we'll say the network marketing style comp model. And as you know, having worked around this industry for a while, it does create some challenges. Certain groups are saying, hey, they're better than this group or that group, and so they're maybe not as aligned. But then we shared equity with all our agents and brokers, and that actually changed the game even further, because now, because all of our agents and brokers are equity shareholders, they can actually benefit from the success of others that they're not directly compensated on. And so it creates a unique, you mentioned ownership. The ownership is for us, changed the game. There were other people who had done sort of similar style comp models in the residential real estate space, but nobody had done it combined with equity until we came. And with that equity component, it again created more alignment than anyone else out in the industry.
That's incredible. I love that. I know personal development also has been an important part of your leadership approach and your leadership style. And I even read a quote in prepping for this where you had said, empower team members to become team leaders, or you're going to lose them. I think that was the quote there. And I know that you recently purchased Success Magazine. So what are some of the efforts, it could be Success Magazine and also other efforts to really help those team members develop, grow as individuals, become team leaders? Can you talk a little bit about your approach to personal development?
Yeah. So, my favorite quote of all time is probably Zig Ziglar's quote, which is, you can get anything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want. And so for me, it's always about, helping others get what they want. And who doesn't want to ultimately sort of have a business that actually, works for them and financially benefits them and gives them sort of opportunities to continue to create and grow and give back. And so, the virtuous circle includes give back as a big part of the virtuous circle. There's a lot of people who are all about just extracting value from an enterprise. And so they tend to be sole proprietors, and they sort of have their thing, and they don't understand that by sharing the pie, it actually grows the pie more than they'll ever get by controlling the pie. And so the idea is, if you can empower others to be better versions of themselves, give them opportunities to learn about, how to build their team and build their longer term rewards, they're just going to be better off. And who wants, it's that phrase, would teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime, versus, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, you know, who doesn't want to ultimately be able to be self-sufficient at the end of the day? And I think that is all about, in my role, I'm 54, I turned 55 this month, but my goal now is to give as much of my knowledge away as I can. Obviously, I've got a lot of financial resources I'll be giving away as well, but the more important piece is really the knowledge piece. How do I share, what I've done so I can inspire people to come up with their versions of what they're going to do, and help them sort of break through whatever, boundaries they have. But in the interim, we're creating a financial model that allows people to actually be successful and learn what it takes to actually, run a team. It takes a while to learn how to work with people, especially if you're helping them succeed as well. And I don't know what the time frame is, but generally it's that 10,000 hour rule. Until you've done something for 10,000 hours, you're not a master of it. So, does it take 5 years, 10 years, whatever that time frame is? But, spending time working with people, you just get better at it over time.
Absolutely. It is really inspiring to see the priority and the emphasis that you put on developing the team members and those around you. I know that personal development and even Success Magazine has been, a big part of my growth and learning over the years. So thank you, on behalf of everybody for the emphasis, and also for kind of taking the torch and keeping, all the great benefits of Success Magazine going. Again, an incredible publication. So we're starting to wrap up here. I was just doing a quick time check. So a couple really quick questions here at the end. Obviously, the company has grown considerably. It's really flown through a lot of stages in its life cycle. How has your role as a founder, as the leader of a company, evolved as you've moved through different life cycles of the company or different stages of the life cycle?
Yeah, one thing that I've learned is that if you're building something successful, there are people who want to take it away from you. So there's so part of the life cycle is sort of how do you stay aligned with your own vision? How do you keep it going the direction that you want it to go, without getting sort of derailed by others while you're growing it? And so now I've got a great team. I've got a really good board of directors. I'm able to really focus on the visionary side of things. Certainly, I don't get the opportunity to get my hands dirty as much, but I do get my hands dirty from time to time, working with various teams and helping them solve different problems where they may get stuck in sort of bureaucracy. And so there's certain things I can help them sort of get unblocked with. But for the most part, now it's more, being visible and accessible to the large organization, being able to give them feedback, giving them encouragement, connect them with the right people. And so my role's is definitely way more high level than it was, 12 years ago when I was in there.
Wearing all the hats. Yeah. Interesting, doing everything. I do think it is so important as the company continues to grow, maybe even more important, to help keep the vision and the culture and the values alive, in the organization, to help keep that alignment that you've talked about and fought so hard for. So it almost is like a shift from kind of being, advocate and protector into that kind of visionary and steward in that role. My final question is, if you could go back, kind of wave a magic wand and go back to the first day of founding the company, with all the perspective and insights and learnings you have now, what advice would you give yourself there on day one?
Hold on. We did. So, our initial goal was, we thought if we could get to 300 agents, we'd be self-sufficient. When we got to 1,000 agents, we'd have been successful. If we got to 10,000 agents by 2010 or 2020, that would have been a big win. Well, we got to 2020 with 25,000 agents. So and now we're talking about numbers we never even thought was even in the cards. We thought that if we thought 50,000 was probably the most agents we'd ever get to, and that was maybe in 2012, 2013. And now we're at 65,000 agents. Well, next year will be over 100,000. Probably another couple of years after that, we'll be over 200,000 agents. And you just sort of do the math on, this growth rate. I think we always knew that it had the potential. I think every entrepreneur is like, it looks good on paper, but then it doesn't actually in real life. In this case, it was actually better in real life than it was on paper. So that's why I say, hold on.
Absolutely. Hold on. I love that. I think it's something we all need to do from time to time. Glenn, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your learning, your insights, and thank you for all that you do to help others learn and grow and develop so that they can be their best selves.
Thanks for having me on. Chat soon.
Thank you.